What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel, and it's time to give you my college football playoff projections heading into Week 5 of the 2023 college football season. I haven't made a lot of changes here to my college football playoff projections. You look at last week, we didn't really have any big-time upsets over the weekend in college football in week number 4. So again, there's no changes here to my playoff projections. They're going to be the same 4 teams that you saw from last week, but there's different, predictions and everything if these games were to happen tomorrow. And I'll do the opposite tomorrow. I'm going to give you my New Year's Six Bowl projections as well. And I did make changes to my New Year's Six Bowl projections, but you'll see that video tomorrow. So let's get right into my college football playoff projections heading into Week 5 of the 2023 college football season. And here is the bracket once again for the college football playoff. You see the number 1 versus number 4 matchup will be held in the Sugar Bowl, and the number 2 versus number 3 matchup will be held in the Rose Bowl. So those are your semifinal matchups this year for the college football playoff semifinals. Let's start with the number 1 seed here for me. Number 1 seed is definitely going to be Georgia here. Not very impressive on the defensive side of the football this past weekend against UAB. They could have played a lot better on defense than they did in the South Carolina game. South Carolina game, they held South Carolina to scoreless points in the second half of that game. And it just seems like Georgia was not ready for, this game against UAB. Maybe they were not focused on the defensive side of the football because they got Auburn coming up this weekend. That'll be a game that, we'll find out if Georgia's defense is still good enough. I mean, they kind of proved that in the South Carolina game. But anyways, Georgia, I know they had a bad performance on the defensive side of the football. I think that's really still enough to make them here my number 1 seed in my playoff projections. My number 2 seed, no change here either. I was going to make a change here, but I'm still going to keep the same thing. It's going to be Michigan here. Michigan, we haven't seen their offense be very explosive just yet. They got Jim Harbaugh back, this past weekend. They didn't really perform that well in the first half. They only scored like 14 points. And I believe they were up like 14-7 at the half against Rutgers. And it looks like Rutgers is a really decent team when you look at their, game against Michigan the other day. So, yeah, Michigan here at number 2. Again, they still haven't found their offense yet. I mean, we're kind of waiting to see that explosiveness kind of break out in a little while for Michigan. But maybe it's this weekend. Maybe it's finally their weekend that they can finally get that offense going. But we still got a long ways to go to figure out if Michigan is a really good team or not. Maybe this weekend we'll find out if their offense is good enough or if it's not good enough this upcoming season, because we're starting to learn more about these teams until we get into about, like I said, Week 4, Week 5. I think we learned a little bit more about these teams in Week 4. But Week 5, I think it will finally be the weekend where we learn about these teams. Let's go to my number 3 seed now. My number 3 seed for me is not going to be any change here either, and it's going to be Florida State. Florida State here at number 3. Very impressive on the road win against Clemson. Went into overtime. Their defense made a huge stop on 4th down. On 3rd down, they made a huge stop on that play. And then the 4th down, it came down to the 4th down conversion for this Clemson team. But Clemson looked like a really good team, but, Florida State, it looked like the better team. Florida State looks like the better team, and they also still got that top 25 win against LSU. So this Florida State team is for real. They are a real playoff contender this year. And also they are, have a chance to make an ACC championship this year. They still got a really tougher schedule the rest of the way, but at least they got Clemson out of the way, and this will be probably an easier path for them. And I was going to mention the schedules here as well. Georgia has the easiest path to get there. Michigan, I don't think they're going to have an easy path now because we've seen the Big Ten teams kind of, get better. We saw Ohio State get better against Notre Dame, and we also saw that Penn State just looks like a really dominant team this year. Florida State, their schedule the rest of the way, I think sets up well for them to really make an appearance in the ACC championship and also for the playoff spot. But this is my number 3 seed. There's no change here to my number 3 seed. And let's go to my number 4 seed now here for the Sugar Bowl. And it's still going to be Texas. Texas here at number 4 for me. Very impressive win on the road at Baylor. That was a game that a lot of people thought Baylor would, win against Texas, but Texas just looked like overall the better team, and also their defense, against this Baylor team proved to be one of the top defenses in the country, and also probably in the Big 12 as well. So Again, not a lot of changes here to my playoff projections, from last week. Again, I had Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, and Texas. Here's my number as my top 4 teams. And again, I didn't really make any changes here to my top 4 teams from last week to this week because there weren't a lot of upsets that happened. Now, heading into week 5, I think we could probably expect some upsets to happen, and maybe these top 4 teams change next week. But let's get to the predictions now. If these games were to happen, tomorrow for something like that, we'll start with Georgia versus Texas here in the Sugar Bowl. I know Georgia did not play that well on the defensive side of the football against UAB, but I was still impressed with Georgia's, defense in the South Carolina game. They gave up, no points in the second half of that game. Texas, though, I was very impressed with them on the defensive side of the football against Baylor. I think this would be a defensive battle if both of these teams were going to play. But I do like Georgia in this game. I do like Georgia to get it done here. It will be a close game, but I like Georgia here to get it done because they do have a dominant team. And, Kirby Smart knows what it takes to get it done here in these big-time games. But again, this is not an official prediction. This is simply a projection based off of how the teams played over the weekend. Then we got Michigan and Florida State here. Florida State, big win on the road at Clemson. Michigan still trying to find their offense here this year. But Florida State, I believe, has, improved so much better than Michigan this year. If you look at that win against LSU, yes, that was a big-time win there. And then they got that win against Clemson on the road, which was a very, very tough road game for them, very tough place to play. I think based off of that performance against Clemson and the way they won that game, I'm going to pick Florida State here. I'm going to pick Florida State just based off of how they beat Clemson. I know it was a very close game, but I think Florida State getting a win like that on the road is very huge for them. And then for Michigan, they're still trying to find their offense. And, based off of that offense and everything, I just don't think Michigan would beat Florida State here because Florida State, I think, has a better offense right now than Michigan. So we got Georgia here versus Florida State in the national championship game. Georgia, obviously, the back-to-back national champions and everything. Florida State, though, looking for their first national title in a long time. If this game was going to be happening tomorrow, I think it would be a close game, probably a defensive battle. But based off of the performances from this past weekend, Florida State much better on both sides of the football, I believe, than Georgia. I'm going to go with Florida State here. I'm going to pick Florida State here to win this game. I think it would be a close game if both of these teams did play tomorrow. But I do like Florida State. They got that win over LSU in the top 25. Georgia has not played really anybody that tough yet. So that's the reason why I think Florida State would win this game, just based off of what we've seen so far from Florida State. So these are my playoff projections heading into Week 5 of the 2023 college football season. Again, the same top 4, Georgia, Michigan, Florida State, and Texas. But different national championship pick every single week by week and everything. So give me your thoughts on these playoff projections down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports channel.